here's what I just found Googling around. Suppose you got a sample drawn on an antidepressant drug, a randomized controlled trial, and it elicits a 63% response in patients. I love the back part of this. There is no assurance that this drug will elicit a 63% response in future clinical trials or in real-world practice. So how useful is that 63%?
The quick and easy answer is very, statistically very useful. Now here's the one thing that this is missing. They told us that the sample percentage drawn from this trial was 63%. So that means the sample proportion in the study showed a 63% response rate. We want to know what P is without the hat. That's the population proportion. Now remember that is close to that by the central limit theorem. But what does close mean? Well, they didn't give us a margin of error. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a margin. They didn't even give us a sample size, so I can't even do a fairly good job of approximating how large the margin should be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to study the mechanics of how to construct one of these intervals. I'm just going to make up a margin of error of 5%. Margin of error in this case is 5%. Now please notice, you don't get to make up margins of error in statistical studies. Starting next week, we're going to learn how to actually calculate them properly and correctly. But for the sake of illustration of how you use a margin of error, I'm going to go ahead and make up a number that we can then play with. Okay, so that is an allowable offness from that. So that parameter that we want is close to this p-hat value of 63%. If the margin were 5%, that would mean that my confidence interval for the response rates of this drug are going to be 63% plus or minus 5%. Now, plus or minus 5%, one we have to add, one we have to subtract. So if I subtract the 5% from 63%, I get 58%. And if I add the 5%, I get 68%. That, my friends, is a range of values. So statistically, I do a study, I get a sample percentage of 63%, no problem. We should also get a margin of error from the study. They didn't give it to us here, that's okay. We're only practicing the mechanics here. Margin of error is 5%. I take that margin, add and subtract it to that 63%, which forms a range of values. Now, what does this range of values tell us? We are statistically confident that the parameter we're looking for is somewhere within that range of values. Might be as low as 58%, might be as high as 68%. But we are statistically confident that it's somewhere in there, just not exactly sure where. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's do some more.